Yes, it's past. Let's start. You can switch your clock off. Welcome everybody. Welcome to members of the ASE. And tonight we're joined by some members from Clydesdale Astronomical Society. And welcome to you too. And welcome to everybody who's joining us on YouTube. Tonight's talk will be about choosing a telescope, and we'll move on to that in a minute. But a bit about the ASE. We were founded in 1924, so we've been going nearly 100 years now, and our membership is growing even through lockdown. We're seeing quite an increase in our numbers, which is very gratifying. We're holding meetings online about twice a month. Before August, we had a twice a week meeting schedule, which is rather punishing, but we've settled back to twice a month now, with the odd ad hoc session in between. We've got a very active imaging and observing group. As I've mentioned previously, they never seem to sleep. So if you do want to join that group, you need to be a member and be prepared to receive lots and lots of messages. We've been doing some live streams on the night sky. We had a session on the International Observe the Moon night, where Mark was showing us pictures of or images of the moon and some deep sky objects, and a session on a not such a good night for seeing on Mars. All the details you'll find on our website, plus links to our YouTube channel, and most of the talks that have taken place during lockdown, you can watch again on YouTube. If you're interested in joining the society, you're more than welcome. Details are again online. It's only £30, but if you're in full-time education or old like me, it's only 15. So that's a sales pitch over with. Coming up on the 6th of November, we have Professor Andrew Coates, who's going to talk about the Rosalind Franklin rover, and I believe is one of the senior scientific officers on the imaging side. That has caused quite a stir on our Facebook page. I think we've got 2,500 hits on that, haven't we, Mark? So we might get a few people coming on to that one. And on the 20th of November, we've got Dr. Rebecca Higgett from the National Museum of Scotland talking about one of Charles Piazzi Smythe's companions, the short astronomical career of John Walter Nicol. So you're more than welcome to join us for those. Those will be on YouTube as well. So tonight, Mark and Ian will be talking about choosing a telescope, and indeed a bit about upgrading telescopes. That will form the majority of the talking session. What we hope to do is have a pretty significant question and answer session afterwards. So anybody with any questions, if you're on Zoom, if you can put them on the chat line, and then I'll call them out or call you out to ask them. If you're watching on YouTube and it's live, if you can put them on the comments section, and Peter will read them out on your behalf. So I'll hand over to Mark. Okay, Mark, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I hope this doesn't end up being too rambling. I've just put everything down I know about. No, it's not true. We've had lots of questions recently about buying telescopes. So this is why we're doing this. We've got quite a few new members now in the society, and the question that comes up very often is, what telescope should I buy? So this is why we're doing this talk now, and we get a lot of questions through our website from non-members as well. So it's not just beginners. This will be some beginner stuff in it as well, but some more advanced telescopes, and hopefully there's something in there for everyone. We do have some scope talk videos on our YouTube channel already, so various members of the society talked about their kit and give short presentations, so that's quite useful. And if you are a member, then come along to our imaging and observing groups, and we talk about quite a lot of kit there as well. It is complicated. People seem to end up going around in circles, and it is complicated. There's so much kit out there. It isn't an easy thing necessarily to do. So the sorts of things we're going to cover are what sort of astronomy do you want to do, because that's of prime importance. We'll talk about optics and mounts as a bit of background, briefly touch on binoculars, do a little bit on beginner scopes, and then some more advanced and separate components, because buying the components separately is obviously a good part of doing that. Things that are upgradable, things that aren't. We'll show some example telescopes that you can get. And then at the end, we'll touch on supply issues that there clearly are at the moment, and Ian will talk about buying a used kit as well. I'm not going to talk about the really advanced, expensive equipment like 5 and 10 grand mounts and scopes. If you're interested in those, then you probably shouldn't be listening to me. You probably know more about it anyway. So I'm talking about the sort of level that your average amateur might be getting involved with. I'm giving you a disclaimer. Ask 5 of us and you'll get 10 different answers about what telescope to buy, if not a lot more. So we're not going to recommend anything specific to you or any supplier. We might suggest you go certain ways based on your budget and what you want to do. So this is based on what a lot of us in the society have seen and bought and used ourselves, and suppliers we've used. The stuff I show here, they are just examples. And we haven't seen them all ourselves. We haven't reviewed them. That would be impossible. And you really need to do your own research as well. But hopefully you'll get some pointers from here. And there are lots of reviews of kit out there on places like Stargazer's Lounge and Cloudy Nights. And beware, it is always possible to buy 11, as I have done on a number of occasions. So as with any purchase you make, you always have to be aware of that. So while we're going through this, looking at different bits of kit, if you are interested in buying a telescope, and these are the things you should be thinking about while we're doing that. What's the thing you're going to want to observe the most? Are you a lunar planetary observer? Are you into deep sky objects, galaxies, clusters, nebulae, and so on? Or if you're a beginner, probably the answer is you want to do a bit of everything until you know what it is you want to concentrate on. Do you want to be an imager? Do you want to be a hardcore imager, as Andrew likes to call us? That's where you do the nice long exposure tracked deep sky objects. Or maybe you want to do a bit of EAA, electronically assisted astronomy. If you haven't heard of that before, it's a sort of halfway house between observing and imaging, where you need much less equipment to do that, but you can get some nice images without expensive kit. And then we have a bit about that on part 2 of our introduction to astroimaging course that's on our website as well. What sort of observer are you? Are you going to be doing casual observing, where you grab a telescope, pop outside, have a quick look at the moon and go back inside, or maybe show a friend or a family member? Or are you going to do this seriously? Are you going to be doing this every clear night? And do you want to be the sort of observer who finds the objects in the night sky yourself, or do you want the mount to do that for you with a go-to mount? Budget, obviously very important. We all have some form of budget. How important is portability? Do you want to be able to lift it up, pop out within 5 minutes, and then pop it back inside again? Or are you going to have it fixed somewhere? Do you need your kit to be upgradable so that it lasts for the duration of your hobby? Or are you happy with just something that will do for now? And the last point, do you want to do real science? Do you want to be contributing to that with projects such as the HOIS project that we've spoken about, or the Exoclock exoplanet project, or observing variable stars or planets and sending them to the BAA and so on? So is that something that interests you as well? So these will all bear greatly on your choice of equipment. And you'll probably go bust in the process. We all spend far too much money on, I think. It is a bit of a danger, so be aware of that. I'll touch briefly on binoculars. If you're a beginner and your budget isn't large, then you can see some wonderful things in the night sky with binoculars. I would suggest you visit a binocular shop. There is a good one in Edinburgh, Viking Optical, where you can try some out and see what works for you. There are some amazing astronomical binoculars out there, which are remarkably cheap actually for the size of them. I suspect those ones, the quality won't be the best, but they certainly have large optics. So for example, the numbers 15 by 70 means the magnification is 15, and 70 is the size in millimeters of each of the objective lenses. So as you can see, you can get 25 by 100, that's 100 millimeter lenses in each side of the binoculars, and you will definitely need a tripod for those. But ordinary binoculars, they work really well too. I have some 8x40s and I have some 15x70s, and to be honest, I prefer the 8x40s. They give me a much nicer, brighter view than the 15x70s, but the larger ones do have their place when you want to look at something a little bit closer. But wide angle views, I think, a wonderful thing to do, lying back in a deck chair and just sweeping across the Milky Way. There's nothing better than doing that, and it will help you to find your way around the night sky, and that's definitely a useful skill for later on when you're using a telescope. So let's do a bit of background so you know what it is that you're buying. Some of it we all assume a certain amount of knowledge, but I thought I would go through a little bit about the optical configurations and how mounts work as well before we get into looking at a few different telescopes. So optical tube assemblies, OTAs as we call them, we'll start with refractors as approved by good old Galileo. That's what Galileo did with his single lens telescope, Jupiter and its moons. They're pretty maintenance free, usually portable, and now we have two lenses to reduce chromatic aberration. But Galileo had a single lens, so he would have had a lot of false color in there. You wouldn't really be able to buy a telescope with a single lens now. You wouldn't want one anyway. Most telescopes have at least two lenses in there. Refractors have two lenses in there, and that helps to reduce the false color. And what I mean by false color, so the brightest stars there, you can see blue fringing around about the outside, and that's the sort of thing that we're talking about with chromatic aberration. The brighter the star, the worse the color fringing usually is. Refractors used to be very long focal lengths to help reduce that chromatic aberration, and you can still buy long focal length ones, and those are really useful for planetary work. But they're less common nowadays. For a bit of history, Johann Abelius went to extremes, and he made his telescope 150 feet long. I think you need a team of people to move to the next object every time. But it's quite amazing, really. But modern refractors now, you can get something called an ED refractor, and that uses a different sort of glass, sometimes fluorite glass, and that stands for extra low dispersion, and that helps to reduce chromatic aberration and reduces the false color. They're a bit more expensive than the standard doublet refractor, but the color correction is a lot better. And you can get triplets and quadruplets, apochromatic refractors. They're a lot more expensive, but they are the best for color correction in the refractors. But the price does go up, as I'll show you shortly. So for comparison, here are three 80mm refractors. That's the size of the objective lens from Skywatcher. So the cheapest one here, an 80mm one, that's £98. That will just have a doublet lens, and it's achromatic, quite short focal length. It'll give you nice wide views of the night sky, but there'll be lots of color fringing with that one, I would suspect. The next one up with an ED lens in it, about £500. Very nice. Extra dispersion lens in it. So the price has increased quite a lot for the same size lens. And then you can go up to a triplet like that, which are very nice telescopes indeed, but we're talking over £1,000 for that, for three elements. So you can see that the price does go up quite dramatically in refractors, and all three of those are just 80mm refractors, a sort of starting point really for the size of refractors. Just to show I'm not biased towards Skywatcher at all, you can buy them from other suppliers as well. The Altair Astro, which I think is really nice as well, slightly cheaper that one, but I don't think it comes with things like finders and eyepieces, so it probably works out about the same. Yeah. Why would you choose a refractor? Well, they're very portable in comparison to some bigger telescopes. Maintenance free, there's not a lot to go wrong with them. You've got the focuser at the back that moves in and out, that's about the only moving part. Easy to use and handle, and a lot of people think that's what a real telescope looks like. A lens at the front, put your eye at the back. There's no central obstruction, nothing in the center of the lens like there is in reflectors, which I'll talk about in a minute. so you can get some really exquisite views, nice and sharp and contrasty. The modern ED and triplet ones are great for wide field imaging and viewing. Good for casual observing, easy to have it as a grab and go scope, and they're good for kids as well as beginner scopes. It's what they expect a scope to look like. Not necessarily the best ones, but I think they are quite good for that as well. The longer focal length ones are really good for the moon and sun and planets. That's where they used to excel, and they're pretty okay for a lot of deep space objects as well. You can disagree with all of that if you're a refractor fan. Against it, they do have smaller objectives. It's very hard to make large ones cheaply, and so the light gathering power is a lot lower. They can be eye-wateringly expensive, some of them, and you can get color fringing in the cheaper ones. You will get color fringing, certainly cheaper ones anyway. And for high res planetary imaging, you really need something quite large in the refractor. Although I said they're okay for DSOs, they're not as good for deep sky objects as reflectors might be. And if you have a planetary version, they can be really long and unwieldy to handle. So let's go on to reflectors, as approved by good old Isaac Newton. And the most common form still is the one named after him, the Newtonian. Because it's a mirror, there's no false color produced by the mirrors themselves. And instead of a lens at the front, you've got the mirror at the back, usually parabola for modern reflectors. Sends the light up to a secondary mirror, which sends it off to the side where you look at it through an eyepiece. So larger objectives gives you better light gathering and resolution. There are more advanced versions such as the Richie Chrétien, which people use for imaging, but I'm not going to talk about that tonight. Again, if that's something you're into, you probably know more about that than I do. For historical completeness, William Herschel had a big one as well. At least he could rotate his through 360 degrees, unlike poor Lord Ross's, where his was stuck between two stone walls. So you guarantee the thing he wanted to look at was just the other side of the stone wall, I'm sure. So some examples for comparison. Now here we have a 130 millimeter mirror. That's about 5 inches. Already bigger than the refractors I showed. That's 139 pounds. If you move up to an 8-inch one, that only goes up to 309 pounds. And if you go up to a 12-inch one, that's only 650 pounds. So you can see the increase in size does not increase at the same rate as it does with the refractor. The largest refractor Skywatcher make is a 6-inch one. And that has an eye-watering price tag of over £4,000. So if you want a large telescope, then within a certain budget, then reflectors are obviously the way to go. So why would you choose a reflector? Well, as you saw, they are relatively cheaper for a larger objective. They give you better light grasp. The larger the mirror you have, the higher the resolution. You can see finer details on the moon and the planets. They're good for moon, sun, and planets as well. And they're great for deep sky objects, the larger objects like galaxies and nebulae and star clusters. Great for imaging. You don't get color fringing. And things like Dobsonian reflectors are great for beginners and kids. And we'll talk about those in a minute. That's a certain sort of reflector and amount. And they are a good all-around general scope, I think. Why would you not choose a reflector? Because they aren't totally maintenance free. So you need to collimate your mirrors, and that means aligning them properly. As you bump your telescope around, they can go out of alignment. And sometimes you might need to re-illuminize the surface. It doesn't happen often. Most of them have a coating there anyway that helps to keep it relatively fresh, but sometimes you do actually have to re-illuminize it. You do have that secondary mirror in the center of your field of view, and that can reduce contrast. They're bulky and heavier, so they will need a larger and a heavy amount. And the larger ones really are less portable. You can find yourself in very strange viewing positions at the top of the the tube on step ladders when I've fallen off a couple, certainly in the night, in the darkness. And for parabolic mirrors, you do require a coma corrector, so that's to reduce the trailing around the outside of the field of view. The stars aren't going to be totally pinpoint all the way across without some extra optical aid. Touch briefly on catadioptrics, or CATs for short. These use a combination of mirrors and lenses. So until recently, the most common one was a Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. So at the back, we have a spherical mirror with a hole in the center. The light comes down through a corrector plate, which corrects the off-axis images, reflected up to a secondary mirror on the back of the corrector plate. And you look at it at the back of the telescope through a hole in the same way you would with a refractor. The other form that's common is a Maksutov-Cassegrain, or a MAC. Very similar, except this has a curved corrector plate at the front. And as you can see, that's actually quite thick. And that does have caused some issues. And the secondary mirror is basically a silvered bit on the back of that corrected plate. So some examples. Here's a 102mm MAC, quite a long focal length for about 172 pounds. That would be quite good on the moon and planets. An 8-inch one, I have one of these, a 7-inch one, sorry, 825, often called a planet killer. It is and it isn't. on the nights of good seeing, which rarely happen in Scotland, it is, but it has other issues as well. But if you're in a nice place with a nice stable atmosphere and steady temperature, they are superb. And an SCT, Schmidt-Cassegrain, that's a 5-inch one for about 500 pounds, shorter focal length. And an 8-inch one as well for about 1,000 pounds. So these are the common things that you'll find on the astronomy shops. Why would you choose that? Quite a short tube length. So for something that has a focal length of a couple of 1,000 millimeters, it's only a very short tube length, so very convenient, easy to handle. Good observation position again, like with refractors, you're looking through the back of the telescope. They are great for moon and planets, and serious planet images like Damien Peach and so on. They would choose Schmidt-Cassegrain. He uses a 14-inch one, I think, but he's not using scopes in Chile. SCTs are good for DSOs, but you really need to have an optional focal reducer to reduce the focal length, because otherwise it's quite a narrow field of view and high magnification. And for deep sky objects, you want a wider field of view and lower magnification. Most of them will come with a go-to mount, and Macs particularly give you fantastically sharp images. As I said, some of them are called planet killers, and on their day, they are good. The day just doesn't happen very often in Scotland, I have to say. SCTs themselves are pretty good all-round general scopes, I think, if you have a focal reducer. They are more expensive than Newtonians, and all of them will require some form of dew shield or a dew heater, because this big piece of glass at the front is just a complete dew magnet. It will be covered in dew in just a few minutes once you take it outside. Slow F ratio means it's not so good for DSOs, and the corrector plates do need extra cool down time, and Macs need even more cool down time. They are less useful for deep sky objects, and the way most of them focus is by moving the main mirror in and out, and that can cause image shift at high magnifications, which can cause some trouble. Okay, so those are optical tube assemblies that you'll commonly see. Here are a little bit about mounts. The mount is easily as important as the telescope itself. In fact, a lot more important in many ways, certainly if you're imaging. If you have a good mount to start with, then you can put any tube, any optical tube on it that you want to, really. So if you can afford to get a good mount at the start, then that's a good thing to do. Every time you breathe on it, if it wobbles, then it really is no fun. And there are certainly some cheap telescopes that do exactly that. If you are an imager, then I would suggest to start with, you spend more on your mount than your telescope itself. GoTo is very useful in light polluted areas. It will find things for you that you can't see with your own eyes. And they are quite fun as well. But simple stuff is fun too. Just a simple point it, go up and down, have a quick look at it and go back inside. But also the more complex stuff, great fun too, and certainly more advanced. Yeah, look at the weight of the mount. That is quite important because some of them can be quite heavy. So if you can't carry it, then you would use it, or you will hurt yourself. And load capacity, that's the weight of optical tube that you can actually use on that mount. If it says 20 kilograms optical tube, then you might want to consider only putting a 15 kilogram telescope on for imaging, because imaging is much more critical of the capability. For viewing, you could probably put a 20 kilogram telescope on it, but for imaging, you probably couldn't. So the basic sort of mount that you've probably all seen, altazimuth mount, telescope goes up and down, left and right, simple to use and set up. It's good for a grab and go telescope, usually lightweight, and certainly cheaper than equatorial mounts. They can still be go-to mounts, and they can track the night sky for you, and you can use them for shorter imaging exposure, such as electronically assisted astronomy, like I mentioned earlier. That is something that a lot of people are doing now. Andrew does a lot of that. In fact, I think that's mostly what Andrew does, and he's given a few demonstrations on that. Said there's more about that on our second video of our imaging course. If you're using longer exposures on an altazimuth mount, the object will appear to rotate within the field of view, so that's why you probably are restricted to shorter exposures. But altazimuth mounts are good enough for most purposes, apart from long exposure imaging, really. So maybe you need to consider, do you need to go to an equatorial mount, or is an altazimuth mount good enough? I mentioned that already. Dobsonian mount. This is something that is an altazimuth mount. It is very easy to use. You just push it around. It goes up and down, left and right. They usually have big bearings on it. There's no clever stuff on it. You just get a reasonably large telescope for the price. It's pretty cheap, and they're great for observing deep sky objects, galaxies and nebulae and so on, and star clusters. They're very easy for children to use, and beginners like them as well, because there's nothing really to go wrong with them. The smaller ones, my proviso is that they do need a solid table to put it on. The mount is still important, and if your table is part of that mount, then it needs to be a solid table as well. But I think you'd be hard put to find a better beginner scope for casual observing, and certainly for kids. Something like a small one like these two here are great for kids to use without any complications, really. But some of the larger ones really are great for serious visual and some short exposure imaging as well. Some of the more complex versions have full go-to on them as well, and they will track the night sky for you. And you get some really large, nice ones there. And let's talk to Andrew about buying one of those for the society. I think that would be great. Half-meter mirror, I'm sure. Isaac Newton and William Herschel would love to have one of those.
We just need a large cupboard, Mark.
Yeah, storage is an issue. Simple Altaz mounts. That's a very simple one there. Up, down, left, right. Some manual slow motions that can carry a 3 kilogram telescope. This one I quite like. I have one of these for my grab and go scope when I take it on holidays with me. You can control that with a smartphone app. You can take a 5 kilogram telescope. I've got an 80mm refractor on that, and it'll find all the objects for you in the night sky and track the night sky. And you can do some 15-20 second exposures on that, no problem really. And I think it's really quite a neat thing, quite stable. You can get some heavy duty advanced ones like this new one from Rowan, and that will take 15 to 20 kilograms on each side of that mount. It's computer controlled as well. So that's really quite a nice mount, that one. A lot of cats already come with a go-to mount, and a lot of them are single arm altazimuth mounts like that instead of a fork like you used to get. And they can be quite useful and fun to use as well. Some of them you can turn into equatorial mounts. Excuse me, it's my coffee arriving. Equatorial mounts. So these you have to align with the pole as accurately as possible. And once you've got your star in the field of view, then all you have to do is track the object in one axis, and you don't get the field rotation in the field of view because of the equatorial mount. This is best, in fact, it's necessary for your hardcore long exposure imaging. They are more complex to use, they're usually heavier, but if you still don't really know what you're going to want to do in the future, they are more future-proof, so it gives you more options in the future if you want to get an equatorial mount. They almost certainly are more expensive. There are two main types you can see on the right. The white one is what's called a German equatorial mount, or a jam, with counterweights down here, and over here we have a fork mounted one. As I said, I won't be talking about the high-end para mounts and 10 micron mounts and things like that, which would be lovely to have but are very expensive. The fork mounts are less common nowadays than they used to be. Pretty much all SCTs used to have fork mounts, fewer of them now. The German one is still the most common, I think. Some example mounts. This one's very popular in the society. Quite a few people have it. It's well regarded. HEQ5 as a go-to one. You can carry 15 kilograms if you're going to be using it for observing, and 11 for imaging, and just under 800 pounds. It's very good. You can get belt drive versions of that as well, which make them really much more accurate. Mike McGovern there seems to have the most accurate one in the country. He can do 5-minute unguided exposures with his without any trouble. I've never heard of that before, but he certainly does. The next one up, really, an EQ6R. That's the one I've got. That can carry about 20 kilograms for imaging, and it's really very solid. That is already belt driven, so it's got reduced errors in the gears. Ioptron makes some very nice mounts, recent mounts, and they have this center balance system, which is pretty clever, and they have very nice equipment there. This one has a built-in guider into the mount as well, and that can take 18 kilograms, but they are more expensive than the equivalent Skywatcher ones. Some people love them, prefer them over Skywatcher. I've never tried one, so I don't really know. And a relatively new one from Explore Scientific. It's obviously something that could compete with the HEQ5. And this one has got wireless control built in, so you can run that from your phone or tablet or your laptop as well. And that's quite a clever one, lots of features in there as well. So I said we'd talk a little bit about beginner scopes. These usually come as a kit, so with your telescope you'll get eyepieces and a finder, and they're a great way to get started. If you're buying the individual bits separately, then you'll have to buy your finder and your eyepieces separately as well. Some of them are easy to use, not all of them. Some of them are harder to use than the most advanced ones, if you ask me. But generally speaking, they're great for beginners and fun for children, usually portable. The quality is very variable though, so you really do need to be careful. And you almost certainly can't upgrade them. So if you bought it and you want to move on, then you'll probably need to replace it and buy something else rather than just put another tube on it. And they can be junk, and they can put you off astronomy. So don't buy yourself or someone else a hobby killer scope. We do have a post on our website, which we update every year with buy a telescope for Christmas, and all of it is about beginner scopes. But don't buy these. That advert I saw recently said this is the best telescope for the money spent on a child. It's the worst thing you could probably give a child that, and if it came from a toy shop, it probably is a toy, and guaranteed to make your child cry. That one would be. So be very careful. So here, some example beginner telescopes. There's 3 Dobsonians there, which are nice and easy to use. The one on the right is actually quite a serious telescope, an 8-inch Dobsonian, so you can do some great observing with that one. the refractor, the 79-pound one. That's what a lot of people expect a beginner telescope to look like. And then here's an equatorial one as well, so you can get equatorials for beginner telescopes too. I think for children, certainly something simple like that is a great one, because it will actually be very easy to use and you'll actually be able to see something with it. But I'm not going to go into any more detail about these just now. There's a lot more detail on our website. And for all of these, you can get yourself a smartphone adapter, and you'd be able to take quick snaps of the moon, one or two things, through those telescopes. That's one of the fancy Celestron smartphone adapters that cost about £30, but you can buy them for about £5, I think, off eBay. They work quite well. So what sort of telescope would you get if you're going to be into lunar, planetary and solar observing? Well, for that, you want something that's called a slower scope. I'm just going to discuss what that means now. You may have heard the terms fast and slow. If you're a photographer, you certainly will have done. The F ratio is defined as the focal length of the telescope divided by the size of the lens or mirror. So for an 8-inch Newtonian, a 1000mm focal length and a 200mm diameter mirror, that'll give you F5. That counts as a fast telescope. If you have an 8-inch Cassegrain telescope, that's twice the focal length of 2000mm, but the same size objective at 200mm. That gives you F10, so that counts as slow. So for lunar, planetary and solar, you really want telescopes that are slower, they have long focal lengths, gives you high magnification, and you can use altazimuth mounts for that, because you're not taking long exposures. You're observing it, you're taking shorter exposures. The motor dry is very useful for that, in some cases essential at high focal lengths. Max SCTs and long focus refractors, those are the sort of telescopes you want to buy if you're into lunar, planetary and solar. The image bottom left I took a few weeks ago of Mars, that is actually a focal length of about 3.5 meters. So if you imagine having a telescope 3.5 meters long, that's the sort of magnification you're dealing with. So you need something that's pretty steady, and driven is very useful as well. If you're into deep sky objects, so galaxies, star clusters, nebulae, and so on, you're wanting something that's faster, so F4 to F7 maybe. These have shorter focal lengths and wider fields of view. So we're talking about Newtonians and short focus refractors, maybe a Schmidt-Cassegrain with a reducer. Altazimuth mounts are fine for observing these, and if you want to do EAA, the shorter exposure photography. But if you want to do long exposure imaging of these objects, then you really need an equatorial mount, a good solid one that has tracking and guiding capabilities. But for these things, you want lower magnifications than for the moon and planets. Get asked, is there such a thing as an all-round scope? I suppose the hard answer is no, but yes, there are pretty good ones, or maybe there are. If you are a planetary imager, you want to specify your kit specifically for that, but you can find good all-rounders. I think an F5 Newtonian between 6 and 10 inches or something is a really good all-rounder for everything. It's great for deep sky objects, but if you want to do the higher res stuff, lunar planets, then with Barlow's, it's still a really good telescope. A 6 or 8 inch Schmidt-Cassegrain, that's great for deep sky objects if you've got the reducer with it. At F10, it's a bit slow, so you really need to have a full use for those. But they are great for the sun, moon, and planets. As I said, they are the choice of the serious planetary images. A nice ED or Apo refractor between 80 mils, 120 mils. These are really nice, portable, and a good balance between all the size, the cost, and the performance, I think. And because of the lack of central obstruction, you could get you get better views in an equivalent size refractor than you would in a Newtonian, I think. So they are a really nice choice, and they're very convenient to use. But for long exposures, the only all-rounder there is really a guided EQ mount. What would I consider to be decent setups? These are a few things that I've spoken about to people in the past. On the left, something like an HEQ5 or EQ6 with whatever optical tube assembly you want, like a decent size reflector or refractor. That will give you a lot of options in terms of imaging as well as observing. A go-to Schmidt-Cassegrain, also nice piece of kit to have, a 6 or 8 inch or smaller or larger. These go-to mounts are usually great fun and often do some of the aligning for you when they actually work, when you've got a wide enough horizon to do that with. The one at the top, this as GTI, the app control mount and an 80mm refractor. I think that's a great all-round piece of kit as well. I have one as my sort of holiday equipment and grab and go mount, and you can find all the objects you want in there, and it's a decent size objective to see a lot of objects. And then we have the Dobsonians. Those two are both 8-inch Dobsonians, and the one on the right is a go-to version of that, and that will find all the objects you want. But just a simple large Dobsonian allows you to sweep around the sky and find all the objects that will keep you happy for years. So I think they are great setups as well. That's my view. As I said, asked another few astronomers, and you'll get 100 more answers to that one. Hardcore imaging, as Andrew calls us, it's not the easiest, but it's what most people seem to aim for in the end. Certainly when I started astronomy, that's what I wanted for my endpoint, and it's taken me quite a long time to get here. You do need a driven equatorial mount, a decent telescope, all the cameras and adapters, guide scopes, guide cam, interface cables, capture software, processing software. It can be very expensive. Some people do it remarkably cheaply, actually. There's a YouTube channel, I think, called Cheap Astro, and he does some amazing things with that. This red box here is a relative new innovation, the ASI Air. That gathers together a lot of the functions you need to do imaging with telescope control and auto guiding and the imaging connections and so on, where you can control your telescope and the camera from a phone or a tablet or a laptop or something. And they're pretty neat. Quite cheap, actually, about 300 and something pounds, I think. So if you are going to do hardcore imaging, then be aware it will cost money. It's relatively complex, but it is a great thing to do and something for you to aim for. If anyone's tried to buy any telescopes at the moment, and quite a few of our members have, you'll find it's almost impossible because of COVID-19. The shipments from China are not getting in, and they're very delayed. And most of the things you'll see are showing very long lead times, some 30 to 60 days or longer. Don't actually believe those lead times anyway, because some of our members have ordered them up, and those lead times have come and gone, and they're still waiting for them. So I don't think suppliers can actually guarantee when they're actually going to come. You may find some old stock with some suppliers. I think someone has recently found something, but most of the telescopes do actually come in by the same importers, same companies. So if one astronomy shop hasn't got it, then it's quite likely the other one hasn't either. But consider buying second-hand kit. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Ian because he has experience of this, and hopefully he will tell us a bit about what he's done.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I don't have a huge budget, which is the main reason that I've dived into used equipment. And now with the virus, of course, it has the added advantage that by definition, it is in stock until somebody else comes along and buys it. It should be cheaper than what you would normally pay in the shops, but you should consider whether that price difference is worth the risk of the used equipment and with no guarantee. I always check every detail and the picture and look all around every picture. Research the seller, Google their name and email address. On eBay in particular, check feedback, but some of course might be fake. And I always look at the complaints feedback to see what responses the seller has given, and some of them can be quite uncompromising, and some of them can be quite good. So that gives you an insight into the seller. And of course, always follow the standard payment safeguards like credit cards and PayPal, things like that. So next slide, Mark, please. That's it. And this has been my experience as I built my kit. I bought an NEQ6 mount from eBay. Excuse me. Normally they're about £1,000, but I got mine for 500, and I broke all the rules when I bought this because it was a cash purchase, and I drove down to Stockton-on-Tees to buy it, but it worked out okay, so that was good. Skywatcher 200p, normally about 260, 300, I got for 110 on eBay. I got an Alter GP cam for guiding, and their new were 150. I got it for 100. You find that some of these shops also advertise on eBay, and when you look at an advert on eBay, look at the details of the seller in case they have a website, because if they do, and you go to their website, the same item can be a little bit cheaper because they don't have to pay eBay fees. I got a guide scope for 75 from eBay, normally about 150. My first Astro modified DSLR, I got on eBay for £84. But you should always make sure that the shutter count is reasonable. I think DSLRs, at least for Canons, are due to blow up by the time they've reached, or before they've reached 100,000. So I always look for something that's maybe down in the 10,000, 20,000. It's a bit like a car, the mileage on a car. My second DSLR I actually bought from Wex Video and Photography for 160, and that comes, Wex give a 1-year guarantee with all their used equipment, and it was like new, and the shutter count was just 800. But as always, buyer beware. And this is a list of some places that I frequent. The Astro Buy Sell is very active. Many items appear on every day. Stargazer's Lounge is similar, and there is Wex Photo, and of course eBay. And as a bit of a wild card, there's Gumtree, because you never know what might be getting sold nearby. But I haven't seen much that would have suited me on that. And Mark pointed out Astroboot and Facebook. And the ASE sometimes gets offered items for sale, and Mark usually sends round an email to members, and some suppliers have clearance offers, but there's not much of that right now because of the pandemic. But again, buyer beware, always check the details. So I think that's my last slide, Mark.
Yep, okay. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, we actually do get quite a lot of emails, well, not a lot, but sometimes we get emails offering telescopes that have been in people's cupboards and garages for a long time. They don't know what to do with them, so we're giving them away. So we've actually managed to find homes for some of them. Some of them being quite amazing telescopes as well as beginner telescopes, but some decent ones. So that's the end of me rambling. As I said, that's my view. I've bought lots of kit in my time. I've bought lots of bad kit as well as good kit. I've used quite a bit of stuff. And that's the conclusion I've come to. I'm sure there's a lot of experienced people who've come to different conclusions than that. But if there's any questions, I'll try and answer it, or other members of the society try and answer as well.
Okay, and there's none come up on the chat line. So does anybody on Zoom have any questions for Mark or Ian?
There were some comments on the chat line.
Yes, there were comments.
Does anybody want to amplify their comments? No.
Anything on YouTube, Peter?
Well, yes, we've got some on YouTube. Michael Patterson asks, how good is the Celestron 76 EQ? Does anybody know?
Never used it. Don't know which one it is. Can anyone else answer that one? It will be, by the sound of things, it will be a beginner's telescope, so it'll be a 76mm refractor, no doubt, on a small EQ mount. So it'll be something to start with. That's about all I can say, really. Celestron telescopes are usually pretty good beginner telescopes, I think.
Yeah,
It'll be something that one that is a starting one, and if you want to upgrade, you'll have to buy something else, I think.
Andrew Ramage would like to know how much it would cost to build something like Blackford Hill. Now, I assume that needs a volcano in the first place. But I presume I don't know if he means the telescopes on Blackford Hill or the whole.
I don't think there are any active telescopes out there anymore, are there? They're just antiques. I think there's a 10-inch SCT, isn't there? I suppose, but they use sometimes.
The students have a half-meter Meade telescope.
Yeah,
it's an off-the-shelf telescope, but there was only one on the shelf in the country.
All right.
But you can buy, I suppose somewhere you can buy it, yes.
But that would be quite a lot of money then. Yeah?
I have no idea, but
Yeah.
20-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain compared to, well, you can buy 14-inch and you can buy 10 inches.
I'm going to probably mispronounce this. As we have Biswati Jana from India. And he's sending greetings and also asking if at some point we can have a session on radio astronomy. And I'm sure that's something that at some point, didn't we have one on radio astronomy? Not that, you know, but
low far array, yes.
Yeah, but I'm sure that's something that would be in our list of things to look at.
It's certainly on my list, and if we can find a suitable speaker, I'm sure we'll be having one. Yep. We've got a question come up from Shruti, one of our new members. She asked, can you get smartphone adapters for binoculars?
I would say the ones you get for telescopes work on them as well, because all that happens is you clamp the adapter around the eyepiece. So assuming the other eyepiece doesn't get in the way, then I would suspect you can actually use it on binoculars anyway. I think if you look at the adverts on the ones on eBay, they show them being used on small spotting scopes or binoculars as well. So yeah, I think the answer is yeah.
And the other, I guess the other thing to do is to talk to one of the suppliers and ask them directly. If you ring First Light Optics or Rother Valley Optics and ask them that question, they'll put you right. But it sounds like it's quite possible.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've got the Celestron XYZ adapter and a pair of Celestron 2080 binoculars, and it works quite well.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Neil.
You can also get the other sort of smartphone adapter, of course, which is the one that puts a planetarium program up and attaches it to a telescope. So you effectively use it as a sort of go-to pointing aid. Uses the north sensor and the elevation sensor in the phone to show where the sky is. And there are mounts to put those on your telescope, so you can use it as a sort of electronic finder.
We have a question from Jim Coyle. He's been looking at the Skywatcher SkyMax 127 AZ-GTI. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Does anyone know the telescope?
Well, the AZ-GTI mount is that computer, the app control thing on your phone.
All right.
I rate that mount. I think that's really good. The SkyMax 127, that'll be a 127mm Max Sutoff. That'll be fantastic for moon, planets, sun, things like that. So yeah, if that's what you're into, definitely, I think it'll be a really good telescope for that. Won't be so good on deep sky objects. Doesn't have the wider field of view, but you'll still see things in it. You'll still see star clusters and galaxies and nebulae through it as well. So yeah, probably quite a decent
I would
telescope.
recommend, yeah, I would recommend that scope as well. I do have it, but do get a G strip for it because it does mist over very, very, very quickly in Scottish climate.
Yeah.
I ought to mention, just for everybody's protection, if you are observing the sun, do make sure you're using the correct sun filter. It will blind you if anybody tries to look at the sun, not alone through a telescope, but without a telescope, but certainly with a telescope. So you do need the right sort of filter.
Randall's been asking about go-to Dobsonians. Yes, they do exist, the go-to Dobsonians. I think Nigel has one, Tosh has one as well. So they do find the objects for you, and then once you've found it, they do carry on tracking. Nigel, do you want to say any more about that since you have one?
Yes, yeah, they are very good, but they're not entirely doing it by themselves. You do have to align them at the start, and you do have to manually center the object before it will track it accurately. But yeah, they're pretty good, especially as you commented in light polluted areas where you can't see some of the smaller, fainter objects.
Yeah,
they'll get you very close, but you've got to center the object yourself. So you've got to be pretty handy with a finder scope.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the case with most mounts with equatorial as well. I mean, even go to equatorials will get you close to the object, but then you want to center it to enhance your pointing accuracy, I suppose. The difference between tracking an object with an altazimuth mount and an equatorial is an equatorial will just move very smoothly in one axis, whereas an altazimuth will be doing a series of up-down steps like that. So it could be a slightly jagged movement. But for some of the shorter exposure imaging, they can work quite well.
Jonathan Smith has raised a question. Jonathan, do you want to ask it?
Yes, I can. Having just got my telescope sitting behind me yesterday, it only came with one eyepiece, and usually they come with two. Where's a good place to go next to go and get different eyepieces? Because the one I've got is sort of low power, so good for looking around. But if I want something higher power to look at the moon in detail or the planets, it's just really what should I be thinking of? Should I be thinking of a zoom one so I can cover lots of things, or just individual ones?
The quality of zoom ones is variable, as is the focus, obviously. Yeah, the stuff that comes by default with kit telescopes are usually okay to get you started, but the quality is often very low. So very quickly you'll find you want to get something a bit better. The usual suppliers, like I use First Light Optics, Rother Valley Optics, Modern Astronomy, all these sorts of places have a good selection. They're good to talk to as well. There's a range called BST Star Guiders, which a number of people have bought, and I've seen very good reviews about. They're not as expensive as some, but you get a really good quality eyepiece for the price. I would say not zoom lenses, not zoom eyepieces. Personally, the ones I've seen have been poor quality. They may be better now, I don't know. Having a range, say having 3 eyepieces, and if you have a Barlow lens, then you've effectively got 6 eyepieces, because the Barlow lens will double the magnification of each one of your eyepieces. So if you have something like a 10mm, an 18mm, a 30mm eyepieces, those are a good range to have, I think. Just my view. Other people might use zooms, I don't know.
And it's worth saying that I think on our telescope help shop, which is on the video, we do a session on eyepieces. So it's worth just probably looking at that video on YouTube.
We didn't video that one, Andrew.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot.
we can talk about that at an imaging group meeting, observing group meeting sometime, if you want to, yeah. Jonathan. Happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to show us the telescope, Jonathan, since you've got it there, which one it is?
Let's see. What can you see? It sits at the back there.
So what is it?
An Orion XD8, so 8-inch Dobsonian.
Is it the one I showed?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, the black one, yeah, that's right.
That's it there. Yeah. So not too big. I mean, that's me sitting down. But just at the limit, I can just carry it. But much easier to carry in 2 bits. But it's dead easy to take it apart, and the base is down there. So it's quite easy to take it apart and carry it as 2. But you can move it a little distance. But I got greedy. I decided I'd like the idea of the 8. I liked the description of all the things you could see with an 8-inch, and so went with that. But yeah, of course, there's no way I can use it at the moment because it's rubbish. I haven't used it yet.
I think anybody who engages in astronomy in Scotland needs lots and lots of patience.
Yeah.
And I describe my telescope as a luggable. I could just about manage to get the tripod, the counterweights, the mount, and the telescope in about 4 journeys to where I want it.
Have you other questions?
Yes, we've got Will. Will Joy.
Yeah, I was just really asking. I've heard a lot about these Barlow lenses, especially with your Mars brilliant shots that you've been taking, Mark. What sort of cost are Barlow lenses?
Got quite a range, as you can imagine. The cheaper end, you're talking £25 or something, which those are the sort of Barlows that come with your beginner's kit. And then Teleview, who make really good ones, I think there's 2 or 3 time Barlows are about £120, and they have power mates which are several £100. So yeah, anything from a few tens of pounds to a few £100, I think, and you probably get what you pay for because of the quality of the image. It's probably about what extra color you get, or how well corrected the lenses are, I think.
And what's the maximum times that you've actually tried to use one? You know, the maximum magnification one.
I've only got 3 times one. Yeah, I've only got 3 times one, but you can get 5 times ones, and I think a lot of people doing the Mars observing at the moment are using 5 times the power mates from Teleview. Yeah, I haven't seen anything more. I think I've seen a 6 times one, but I think that's about it.
It's quite amazing. Okay, thanks very much. Cheers, Mark.
There's a question there from Ron Rothammer. Ron, are you there? So Ron's asking, he says, if you buy a second-hand Newtonian, how do you know if the optics are good or not?
Difficult to, I mean, how do you know if the optics are good in the first place for a telescope? I suppose we're not going to test them out necessarily. I mean, you can test out the optics. What you want to be looking for in a second-hand mirror, I suppose, is the quality of the surface. If it's a bit grubby, a bit dusty, that's not so much of a problem. It's if it's scratched or the surface is starting to color, you know, the milky and things like that. If you've got a nice fresh looking silver on it, I mean, Newtonian mirrors, you can wash them off with distilled water, and most of the gunk and the dust will come off with that. If you can see holes in your silvering, then that's something you want to worry about, I suppose. And the coating, this silicon dioxide coating is going a bit milky as well. That's probably not good as well. I mean, you can get them resilvered, reluminized, as I said. It will cost you up to £100 or something like that for an 8-inch mirror, maybe under £100, I would imagine. So it's not a huge amount, but it's not something you want to do unless you have to.
Yeah.
Okay. And Jim Coyle says, thank you very much for your comments.
Okay.
Any more? No.
Gordon Mackay had commented it's important to consider how much kit will be hanging off the back of SCTs with float mounts. That's definitely true. Have you got experience of that, Gordon? Can you advise on that? Just unmuting, hopefully. There you go.
The experience I had with my LX200, it's a fork-mounted 14-inch SCT, and I wanted it equatorially converted, so I use a wedge. However, the alignment procedure for the telescope demands that you have to rotate it so that the center axis of the telescope is pointing, you know, upwards at an angle equivalent to your latitude. So if you've got a whole lot of imaging equipment hanging out the back, and then later on when you're observing, if you're going to an object, the telescope doesn't necessarily know that you've got all this stuff hanging on it, and you know, you can end up with sort of mechanical failures if you're not careful. So you've got to be really careful about that, you know. So I have some experience with that, and I've had to learn a few lessons.
Other people we've commented. I've heard people comment on Mead stuff as well. There's been trouble getting things to work and getting repairs. Andrew, you had a Mead as well.
Yeah, I think I don't know if the situation has changed, but there was only one Mead engineer in the UK, and he retired.
No, the situation hasn't changed. I think I had the first 14-inch SCT in Great Britain, and it insisted in pointing through the floor of the observatory all the time because it was GPS controlled, and when you've got it inside a dome like I have, of course it can't see the GPS constellation, so it didn't know where it was, you know, so that was a problem. And then eventually the whole thing had to go back to California. It's been back twice to California and back here until finally it was sorted out, and I was able to speak to the one retired engineer.
Yes.
But anyway, eventually it was all sorted out. I've lost all my hair and I'm 10 years older, but it now all works.
Well, you're not alone, Gordon. I too am. I'm short of hair. My Mead lasted 3 months, and I was told it'd have to go back to America. It was a 6-inch ETX.
Oh yeah.
And Rother Valley sent me an 8-inch to use in the meantime, and I said, "It's quite nice. I'll keep this one." And they said, "Okay." And it lasted, I think, 2 years, 2.5 years, and the electronics are fried. And I now have a very nice optical tube.
Yeah.
Which I use on my EQ6 mount.
I know, I'm afraid there are some horror stories. Some people have no trouble, but an awful lot of people have got some horror stories. So, you know, I must have invested something like 10 or 12,000 pounds altogether. And buying new is no guarantee, you know, for success.
No.
I think the Society has a 10-inch SCT, which Will currently has. So, Will, you need to bear all these things in mind, obviously. I think Mead were going out of business. I don't know if they have or whether they survived or not, but it doesn't bode well, does it, really?
No, and the other thing is, you know, you've probably seen there are huge Mead groups online, you know, Yahoo groups and Google groups, and there are some ferocious conversations taking place from time to time. People are tremendously unhappy. You know, touch wood, I'm now getting really good results with it. I had trouble with the image shifting at focus with the automatic micro focuser. and all sorts of problems with the mechanical movement, all sorts of problems with the electronics. But finally, you know, all sorted out, and it's now, you know, it's now running really well. But I need it to work accurately. My hobby is tracking asteroids, so I need the thing to work properly, and I've made sure that I've held Mead to account and made sure that the thing works.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thanks for that, Gordon.
I was going to say one problem I've seen on a Mead that belonged to a society that I used to belong to that was outside in a dome, unheated, was condensation inside the tube. And in fact, we had condensation on the inside of the corrector plate. And
Oh yeah, I've seen that. I've heard of that.
We ended up buying a desiccator and screwing that in place of the eyepiece every night.
Yeah, well, that's actually a good idea.
Yeah, well, about once a week you have to refresh the desiccator. So we had some packets of them, but
I've had to clean. Yeah, I've had to remove the collector plate very occasionally and clean it off with isopropyl alcohol.
Yes, but the other worrying thing is it was rusting inside as well, because most
Oh,
of the
blimey.
screws are steel, not stainless steel on a Mead. In fact, you used to be able to buy a kit to replace all the screws with stainless steel ones. But there's still things like the big shaft in the middle, the mirror goes up and down, is still bare steel. So
I'm terrified because having taken all this time to get it all working properly, I'm now moving house from Hampshire up to back to Kelso, and I've got to move the whole observatory and the telescope, and you know, I'm praying that it all goes well.
I'm conscious that this session was for people who might want to get into astronomy. This discussion is going in a direction that said, why the hell should I?
No, it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. You know, I've recently been able to tell the Minor Planet Centre that they've got the orbit of Bennu totally wrong. So it is worth it.
That's impressive.
I think people can take out of this conversation with respect to Mead what they will. I can say my experience has been fine. That the optics have been fine.
Yes,
but with most go-to scopes, the go-to can be a very useful facility, but you can be adding quite a lot of expense to your introductory cost of getting into astronomy by going to a go-to, and it may not be upgradable. So unless it's a separate go-to mount, an integrated go-to like the Celestron, the Meads, and some of the Skywatcher ones tend to be standalone pieces of kit, which are very useful and fine for many people, but they do have their limitations.
Yeah.
I was speaking on the Celestron and Skywatcher. They are actually interchangeable. Both the Celestron that I've got, you can actually upgrade them from a small refractor to 127 Mach without any trouble whatsoever, along with the Skywatcher one as well. There is a lesser Skywatcher one going around that's for very small telescopes, but apart from that one, I think they're all quite upgradable.
Oh, good.
If you have the ASGTI mount, it's just got a standard dovetail connector on that, so you can put anything up to about 5 kilograms on that. So yeah, that's a standard connection to a mount. Yeah.
I guess it's worth saying, Mark, isn't it, that the weight limit is for everything. So
yes, well,
it's an optical tube, and if you want to put a camera on it, if you want to put a Barlow on it, if you want to, it's the all.
It doesn't include the counterweights, but it includes all the other stuff. Yeah. So everything on the other side from the counterweight, if you've got counterweights, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have any more questions?
Well, we have a comment from Andrew Ramage. He's saying the Yahoo groups is closed.
Yes,
OG. I don't know what the OG means. That could be ongoing. I don't know.
That's probably to do with Mead.
Yeah. So Yahoo don't do groups anymore, do they? I don't think.
The moderator's probably committed suicide.
Well, I have to say my experience with Celestron has been pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, experience with Skywatch has been pretty good as well. I think
Yeah.
they're very solid engineering, pretty well made, pretty reliable, mostly. But you get lemons as well with everything you buy. You can get lemons.
Sure. Yeah.
The only problem I've had with my Celestron 8 GPS is muck on the track where the roller bearings go round on the azimuth mount, which I've taken it apart several times and cleaned it, because it seems to get bits of plastic and bits of gunge, and then you get these sort of strange notches as you rotate it. It probably doesn't matter because I don't image with it, but it sounds horrible, so I take it apart. But they do come apart reasonably easily, that, you know, the older Falk Celestrons. But I think, like most of these, you need to have someone who knows something about electronics to fix them. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
I've actually replaced the one of the encoders on the Mead. Luckily, I found out what it was and just bought it from the States. Had it shipped over, got charged a large amount of customs duty, but we managed to replace it. So you can do some things yourself, but you have to be fairly handy.
There's an item on the chat we missed from Jonathan saying he's found some stock at astroshop.eu. They have a round Dobsonian telescopes, so that's somewhere to buy kit if you want to buy some at the moment. You may have stuff in there.
Yes, hurry before they put an extra duty on it.
Yes, quite.
We won't go into that.
Not only the duty, it won't be CE marking, won't be acceptable from sometime next year. It has to be signed CEU or CUK.
John, I said we won't go into that.
Let's keep the politics out of this, yeah.
Unless you're in Northern Ireland, of course. Luckily, we're not, when it's different.
Right. Okay. I'm going to suggest we wrap this up unless there's anything specific anybody has got to raise. So
the only thing I would say is app controlled mounts. How long will the phone that runs the app still be around? And once the app controlled mount, you know, if you haven't got the phone anymore, the mount won't work. So
well, it's normally associated with Android, you know, or I, you know, so one would hope that they would upgrade the apps to run on the latest versions of Android.
Yeah, I've had apps for the telescope on at least 3 different phones.
Yeah.
Mobile phones aren't going anywhere anytime soon, are they? So they'll keep upgrading the app for the
Android, and I think you're safe with Android and iOS.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And Windows.
The Skywatcher.
Once it becomes a brain implant, then that might be different.
Yes.
You just better plug into a large remote telescope then.
You just stick your finger in it.
Mark just popped the slide. Can you go back a slide, please, Mark? Forget this. I've given you the sales pitch at the bottom, but if you do want to join us, our imaging and observing group, the first Wednesday of each month, we have a session. It's huge fun and lots of very, very useful information about imaging and observing, as well as the occasional views through Microscope. So, but that's for members only. But that's the first, I say, the first Wednesday of the month. Next slide, then, Mark. And just a reminder that on November the 6th, you're all more than welcome, whether you're a member or you're joining us on YouTube for our talk by Professor Andrew Coates. I hope the members from Clydesdale have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Happy for you to come along, and thank you for the reciprocal invitation to your meetings. It's very nice that we can share these things. Anything else to finish off with, Mark?
No, that's everything. Thank you.
Well, great job. I think we should.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah.
Excellent. And Ian.
Excellent.
And Ian.
I might even join.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
Details on the website, Gordon.
Yeah, I'll go to the website. Thank you.
Pleasure. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Here's Andrew.
Night. Thanks.
Night all.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye, folks.